to do, and we don't have that many people. Our team is made up of 15 product designers. Our product designers can sort of help define a product, they can write code, they can work out an interaction, they can make something visually pleasing. So 15 people working on the product that goes to our users. We have 5 UI engineers. They're the guys that help us build new interfaces and really help us push the product in the interface in new directions that haven't been explored yet by us or by other companies. We have 5 UX researchers. They help us understand our users before we start building a product. They also help us test our products to make sure that they're actually going to behave the way we want them to, and that it's actually going to work for our users. We have 4 communication designers. These are the people that help us design our messages and design the ways that we deliver them to our users. They're really the voice, the explicit voice of our company to our users. And we have 1 content strategist, helps us figure out the words to use and how to use them and when to use them and the rules around that. And so that's our team. We're 25 in a company of 1,000. So I think this is probably a little lower than a lot of companies, especially ones that have such a user visible component. So it's a challenge, but it also means that we get to work on really highly leveraged stuff all the time because pretty much that's all we can handle. If you think about this slice of the world as like the slice of Facebook users out of the world so far, it's still tiny, and we're even tinier. That's our team, the little dot, not to scale. And I think about this image a lot. You know, it's a bit overwhelming to think that, we really are starting to capture a huge number of the internet users in the world and sort of bring them onto our site. And it's kind of overwhelming. We're a really tiny little speck trying to work with them, which kind of raises the question. This is the big question of the night that we want to talk about. How does a team of 25 people design for 250 million users? And it's overwhelming and a little humbling to think about this. So the thing is, we don't know the answer to this. We have a few guesses, and we want to walk through some of our guesses so far. And some of these are going to turn out to be right. Some of them are going to turn out to be not the right guesses. And but we just want to walk through a few of them and sort of tell you some of our guesses about how you design at scale for so many people. So our first guess is that a designer should be their start to ship. We think the way you design a product that really makes sense for so many people is to be there from the beginning to the end. This is sort of the typical, this is sort of like the straw man version of how projects get sort of conceived and then shipped, some strategy, and then you define and prototype, iterate, all the way through launch. This is how a lot of design teams actually operate. They operate in a particular stretch of this whole sequence, and they sort of they get some requirements that come out of the strategy, and they sort of figure out a solution for that. And they iterate a few times over some prototypes and hand it off, and that's it. Maybe there's some conversations afterwards to sort of align some things, but that's it. We didn't want to work this way. We wanted to work more like this. You join a team, you do a ton of stuff in between, whatever's going to help the product be really great, and then you stay there to the very end until you're pushing things out the door. And we prefer to really be just tied in from beginning to end, to be there for all the little bits, so that the vision that you help the team develop at the beginning can be carried through to the last little bug is fixed and the product goes out the door. This is a really big deal to us. We spend a lot of time making sure that designers can stick around for the entire project. So to sort of give you an example, I want to walk through the latest homepage redesign we did and sort of just pull out some examples of how design was involved from the very beginning to the very end and how the role of the designer on a project changes over time. So this is just to sort of make it clear, the homepage redesign I'm talking about is the homepage redesign where we have sort of the square pictures of people and the post next to them. And it launched in March of this year. So early on, the challenge we set for ourselves was we really wanted to simplify and streamline the way information traveled around the site, the way users publish messages to each other and consume messages from each other, just to really, let this happen even more efficiently, more effectively, and to really streamline the whole thing. So we wanted to simplify the structure of the data that was flowing around the site. That was the first thing. We really wanted to sort of take all the different diverse ways that information flowed around the site and really nail it down to just one standard way. That's sort of the list of fields on the left. And at the same time, right from the very beginning, we had a designer in the room working through the visual structure and we wanted to make sure that the data structure we were going to push around the site really accorded with the way users saw it and understood it. So after we had this conversation about what the structure of all these bits of information were that float around the site, we needed to make sure this was actually going to work in code. One of the things we found that's really important is the sooner you get to code, the sooner you understand if your design works across a diverse set of data, diverse set of situations. And so right away, we started writing some code. I wrote up these small PHP functions to just let me punch in lots of data, just PHP arrays, and have it spit out design stories. So we could just sort of see what this looked like under a variety of conditions. It also is really helpful. You can sort of take a lot of screenshots of this and toss it into mockups. So you can sort of try lots of different iterations on designs really quickly. So starting from PHP, moved to HTML. And then it became a matter of balancing the trade-offs. We sort of wandered around for a ways. We thought about sort of, maybe having some top stories, some ways of highlighting the very most important stories, making it sort of like a newspaper. Didn't feel right. The balance wasn't right. Too much content that was up-to-date and interesting was buried. So we tried another design where we just really gave you the raw log of everything that's happening off to the right, and then sort of put some administrative stuff up on the left. The balance still didn't feel right. It felt too impersonal. It didn't feel like it was about your friends. So we started wandering a little closer, and we thought, well, maybe this feels right. And we had some links up near the top nav to sort of let you drill into sort of specific sets of friends. And we played with it, and we thought, wow, that's pretty cool. This actually seems like a useful way of navigating through this information. So we finally arrived at this rough idea to balance all the things that we needed to have on the homepage. It's a lot of different things. So just to be clear, this was a mock-up that we created to basically explain this vision to a variety of teams. We had to bring a lot of teams on board so they could all work in parallel so we could ship this thing as quickly as possible. So this is a static mock-up. We usually don't advocate static mock-ups. They don't always deliver the best results, but in this case it was the right tool to get a variety of teams on board and sort of synchronize about what the balance of the page was that we were shooting for. And so from that point on, it was just about working out all the individual flows. We just wanted to sort of take care of all the details, make sure every edge case and every workflow was mapped out. So it's working out things like how do users upload an individual photo to the site. And then starting to refine the individual pieces. So the highlights over here is the highlights is the right column on the home page. And when we started out, we put a real emphasis on the content. We thought the content is the most interesting thing. But the thing is, it felt a little dry. It felt like your friends weren't present there. So then we tried bigger photos. Maybe bigger photos of your friends feels a little warmer. But it still didn't feel right. The photos felt a bit overwhelming. It sort of dominated the whole column. So we tried a version where we took, maybe the news feed, we could sort of shrink it down and highlight the specific posts that were the most interesting. And it kind of felt right, but it felt a little clumsy, and we couldn't always surface things like, engagement stories or other things that we wanted to feature there. And so we just thought maybe the photos on the right, it wasn't quite working. We ended up with this design, which sort of balanced all the different pieces. But it took us a lot of iterations to work through this particular component. And then I want to sort of go into, this is sort of just a small example of this, but this happens quite a bit at the very end of projects, is having a designer that can write code and that can turn something around really quickly is really crucial to making sure all the details get nailed down. So this is at the bottom of the home page. There's this really important component, which is the Feed Me button. It's the Show Older Posts. And we really wanted to sort of highlight this, so we put a blue box around it, and it looked pretty great. It's easy to find and easy to spot and click, except we had this really ugly footer underneath it. The two combined, you have sort of these two boxes stacked up, and it sort of created just a bunch of visual noise and looked really awkward and kind of obscured this big Feed Me button that this is the advantage of having a designer that can be on the spot and make a design, write code, and push it through the whole cycles, that we were able to sort of spot this, write the code, push it out, and have a fix in place within just a couple hours. And so we switched to the new nav, which returns the focus to where it should be, to the Feed Me button. So that's the advantage of having a designer there all the way to the very end, just being able to spot details and fix them on the spot and really polish it at the end. So that's our first hypothesis. We think this works. We're still trying it, of just having a designer there on the project from the very beginning to the very end. So I'm going to pass the mic off to Julie.
Okay. So I'm going to talk about the second hypothesis that we have, which is share early and share your work often. So sharing is really important to us. It's sort of been something that a philosophy that we've espoused from the very beginning. And when it boils down to it, we really think that sharing your work with your peers, with your users, results in higher quality work. It's especially critical for a team like ours because we don't have this guy at our office. So for those of you who don't know, this is Donald Draper. He is the executive creative director at Sterling Cooper on the show Mad Men. And so we don't have a creative director here at Facebook. It is an intentional decision. Ever since the early days, we've kind of had this bottoms-up philosophy of individuals, making decisions, pushing decisions down to the lowest level, because the people who are working most closely with the product are probably the ones who are going to be able to make the best decisions. And so, because we don't have someone like a creative director, it becomes really critical for the team to work together and to share. And back when we were small, this wasn't so hard. Every Monday we'd get together in a room and we'd show off our mocks. And when you have 3 or 4 designers, this works pretty well. But then you scale to 10 or 12 designers, and suddenly you could spend entire Monday going through mocks, and you wouldn't be able to go through everything to the depth that you'd want to. So as part of the process, over the years, we've developed a lot of tools to try to help us share more effectively with each other. And one of our tools is Pixel Cloud. This is developed by one of our designers, Alexander Roche, about 1.5 years ago. And this is he really wanted to come up with the easiest way, the most frictionless way of sharing pixels with other designers on the team. And so instead of going through it, I think I'm going to attempt a live demo and show you how it works. Does this work? All right. So say I'm working on this, sweet slide deck. And, oh God, it's so hard to see my mouse. I want to basically capture it, send it off to a few people for feedback. So I might take a screenshot. I do have Pixel Cloud. And then it goes into my clipboard. And so with a quick combination of Shift Apple 2, we'll see oh, it's not working. Hold on, Adam. Adam, you want to help me? Shift Control 2.
Hold on, it's okay.
See, I was like, we don't want to attempt a live demo. It's not going to work. And I was like, no, do it live, do it live.
No, it works. Hold on. No, it doesn't work. That's okay. We have backup.
All right. Thankfully, we do have a backup. Okay, but we do have Pixel Cloud. And in case doing it live doesn't work, so say I'm working in Photoshop, I have a mock, I paste it to my clipboard, and then I can pull up a small dashboard for a new pixel, type my comment in, and then hit send into the cloud. And then I shall see it on pixelcloud.com, which is the repository where all of our pixels in the cloud go. Browse through it, see what other designers are working on, and eventually land on this page where people can see a high-res version of my mock-up, as well as post comments. And I can contribute to the discussion. This is sort of a great way for us to get quick feedback, as well as to sort of get a sense of what other designers on the team are working on. So we launched this about 1.5 years ago in March of 2008. And since then, we've had about 6,000 posts from the design team alone inside Pixel Cloud, which averages out to about 230 posts per designer. So that comes about to about 15 posts per day. So that basically, every hour, you can go and check Pixel Cloud, and there will be something new for you to see. Things people are working on. Obviously, we share a lot of our revisions, tweaks to things that we need to go in and fix, or things that aren't working. And we'll also highlight things that we love or not so much. And so, Pixel has really been great for awareness and to sort of just get a lot of people's opinions on things. But it doesn't do everything. It's not sort of the magic bullet for solving all of our sharing concerns. For example, it might be a really busy week at the office. People are heads down working. You post something into Pixel Cloud, and you just don't get that much feedback. And additionally, for making decisions on things that affect the entirety of the design team, sometimes you do kind of need people in a room to hash over stuff and have that long debate. And so this leads us to the second thing that we developed for our team, which is the concept of working groups. So a working group is a group of 2 or 3 people who oversee a specific area of focus. So the working groups that we have right now, visual design, simplicity, and front-end code. And so, the 2 or 3 people on the design team focus on that area and solve different problems within the team. So for visual design, they're looking at the common, design patterns that we have on the site, trying to figure out what buttons should look like, what should tabs look like, how do we make sure that all of the designers are designing with one unified style and one unified voice. The simplicity team is looking at all of the products that we're building and making sure we're designing for the universal case and for the 85% majority and trying to keep our products simple so that it's not cluttered up with a lot of features that not that many people are going to use. And the front-end code team is working on the best practices for HTML and CSS in the code base, and also working really closely with the visual design team to make sure that we're writing the right type of abstractions for our visual components. The best thing about all of these working groups is that they have office hours every week. So, instead of feeling like you're bothering your neighbor by asking them for feedback, but yet you really want an avenue to get that great feedback, you can go to one of these teams, and they have a number of hours throughout the work week dedicated where all of the members of the team are in a room together. And you can sort of just go, present your work, and get really detailed and critical feedback. And so because we have this consistently, there's always a place for a designer to go to get that feedback on their work and then keep improving and then just bounce ideas off of other people. So that's one half of sharing, sharing with the team, making sure that we're in sync and we're communicating. The second half is sharing with users, which is also really critically important. So, in a normal product cycle, you have your kickoff in the beginning, and then you work on the project until something ships. And at some point, you're going to work on, actually building out the component. And with most companies, you're going to do an amount of user testing after you've built a prototype. You might bring users in to do user studies, and you might run A/B tests, and we do all of that. But we also try to start doing the user testing early on, even long before there's any code written down, or even long before we have polished mocks to show. So I want to run through an example of our work on the privacy wizard. So this is sort of a project that we're currently still testing, hasn't fully shipped yet. But the idea is we introduced the idea of sharing with everyone on Facebook a few months back. And so we're working on the best ways to message this to the user base so that they can understand, I might want to open up my interests to everyone so that people who are searching for me on Facebook can find me more easily. So this is the general idea for the privacy wizard. And so, prior to building anything, just almost immediately after we decided to even do the project, we brought in a number of users for user testing sessions, and we ran them through just 30 different mocks. And it's really quick, just trying out ideas, trying to get an idea of what they're thinking and what ideas are resonating with them. After we built the product and we had a prototype, then we had another 7 sessions of user testing. We brought in a lot more users, but we decreased the number of mocks because all of that user testing that we did up front helped us find the right directions that we wanted to explore, and therefore we didn't have to waste a lot of cycles building out things that weren't going to work. So this is why we really try to user test early. So we're testing really rough mocks in the early stages. We're not spending a lot of time on it because we really just want to get at the main idea. So these are sort of the examples of things that we showed users, try to understand the messaging, trying to understand how they feel about having a lot of different options in a dialogue on the homepage and whether or not they're going to engage with it. So then afterwards, we'll refine them a little bit, and here we'll focus more on the visuals, on the actual interactions, and try to get that to a really good state. Then finally, we'll build it, and we'll build a number of prototypes, and now we can, sit down with the user and have them actually walk through the entire process of, logging on to Facebook, seeing this message, interacting with it, and getting their opinion. So in short, our philosophy is feedback is good. Get feedback from as many people as you can. Your designers, product people, anyone at the company can give great feedback. My mom gives great feedback. But getting that feedback as early as possible in the process is even more valuable because it helps us save time and it helps us, find the right avenues to pursue and not waste a bunch of cycles. So that is our second hypothesis, share early and often. And now I'm going to pass it on to Adam.
Hey guys, I'm going to try to project. The kitchen's a little loud. I'm going to talk about our third sort of best guess at how to be effective as a small team in a big company with a big user base. This is about getting your hands dirty. Getting your hands dirty can mean different things for different types of designers. I used to be in print design. One thing that they teach you in graphic design school is to learn how to go on press, make sure things go the right way. In architecture school, they teach you to know your materials. We believe in a similar philosophy for web design. We believe that it's important that you understand how the underlying systems work. This basically translates into something that Aaron's already touched on and Julie mentioned also in brief, which is that all 15 of our product designers are technical to some degree. They write some code, mostly PHP, JavaScript, HTML, CSS. Some guys can go a little bit further back into the libraries and the data layers. But we write code. This is Everett. He's a designer. I tried to use pictures of us designers. Sorry, I'm blanking for a second. Oh, I do want to point out that this isn't a hard requirement. Not everybody writes code every day. Some people used to write more code than they do now, and vice versa. It's really about helping move our process, or streamline our process. And we believe it helps for 3 reasons. The first is that it really eases the relationship between design and engineering. How many designers are in the room, real quick? Okay, we got about a couple. How many engineers? We got more. How many designers have been frustrated with an engineer? How many engineers have been frustrated with a designer? All right, so it goes both ways, right? It's fair. We think that it's important to sort of acknowledge this. Designers tend to design things sometimes that may not be possible or practical to build. Engineers sometimes don't implement things to spec, and you may spend a lot of time as a designer writing detailed pixels here and there to get things just your way. We find here, given that we really are focused on product, we build systems that people interact with. The designers tend to err on the side of maybe oversimplicity. We'll strip out too many features very regularly. Engineers are smart people. They tend to get complicated interfaces. They tend to err in their product opinions about on the side of functionality. They want it to do everything it can possibly do. And this, we fight a lot. We argue all the time. What we try to do here is get designers as involved as possible in the actual engineering sort of cycle. So if we can communicate with code, if I can actually build the HTML myself, or build the templating myself, or even build the whole renderer myself, it tends to ease the relationship with the engineer. You also can, maybe if you're lucky, if you're a decent programmer, you can earn a little bit of credibility as well. But it really streamlines the process. It also removes the feedback loop. I don't need to send mocks out, wait for an engineer to bring me back sort of a working prototype, and then give them corrections. We can just sort of go in and fix bugs ourselves, especially tweaks. That's the first reason why we do this. The second main reason why we do this is that we believe that it's important to understand the medium in which you work. This is sort of a vague idea, but I think that what it's really trying to get at the heart out is that we're not designing static mocks. We're not print designers. We design systems. And understanding those systems is really critical to us doing a good job. You can't just design a mock for one page within a flow or one flow within a site. You need to understand how everything works under the hood. And the more you understand that, the more sort of informed your design decisions can be, and the better you can be, or the better work you can produce. But the third thing, or the third main reason why we focus on technical designers is what I'm going to try to talk about the longest today, which is that it really helps us move fast. We really, really, really value moving fast. This is Ben. He's another designer here. He's going from meeting to meeting, by the way. We used to be in different buildings down in downtown Palo Alto. We value moving fast for several reasons. The first is the most obvious. We have a lot of competition. Our products span a wide variety of verticals. We do photos, we do events, we do streams, we do video. We've got competitors in all of these areas. It's really important that we can constantly iterate and stay ahead of the competition whenever possible. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. Oops, sorry. The other big reason, or the second reason why I think we value moving fast is that markets change. For us, what this specifically means is that what people are comfortable doing changes. People we've seen over the last 4 or 5 years, as we've developed, have become more comfortable sharing different types of information, more information often. We've seen a trend from people being very comfortable only setting up static profiles with my favorite movies, my favorite interests, a little blurb about me, to status updates about everything they're doing all the time. This is different. We need to be able to adapt our product to these different needs and these different use cases because the markets are changing. And the third reason has more to do with our philosophy for product development, which is essentially to ship and iterate. This is a point of tension now that we're a large company with a large user base. We can't really push bugs very often. But we do believe at the core that it's important to get products out in front of users early so that we can get really valuable information about how they're used. This sort of comes from a couple different places. The first place is that we really believe that you can't really evaluate a design until you can play with it. Mocks lie. Photoshop is our tool of choice. Actually, I don't think any of us wireframe, which is pretty rare for product designers. We all think in Photoshop. If you suggest an idea to me as an engineer, I'm going to probably have you come by my desk and we're probably going to mock it up. But the dirty secret is that Photoshop lies. Photoshop lies for a couple of reasons. The first is that it completely lacks content, or real content, I should say. Designers tend to put pretty pictures in their mocks with convenient copy that breaks properly, so we don't have to deal with hanging words and the rest of it. I'm going to show you a quick example. This is a feed. This is a mock I did in the last homepage redesign. This is an example of a very clean post. This is Blaze. He's one of our product designers here. This is an example of a slightly more complicated post, but this is sort of where we were in our head with what we thought the scale or the complexity of an individual post would be. We push it, we open up the platform, we open it up to other developers, and then we get posts like this. This completely changes everything. This is 600 pixels taller and knocks everything off the page. Dave Morin is laughing over here. He's going to help me with this. The other reason why Photoshop lies is it completely lacks context. We tend to focus on very small components. I'm going to show you another mock that I did for the homepage redesign, which was an idea for the highlights column, which is the column on the right-hand side, which is supposed to show you the most interesting content. I've tried to take a cue from newspaper design and start with a very large, very bold image that really established the column. There's a lot of stuff going on the page I thought would be great. I'm not even sure what that post is. I thought this looked good. I did. I put it in the page and it clearly did several things. It set the page completely off balance and it pushed the only ad on the homepage below the full, which would affect revenue in crazy, crazy negative ways. Zill's laughing at some mocks. So we try to prototype early, and Aaron mentioned this. As soon as we can get something in front of people, either us, and we test lots of stuff internally for weeks, or users, the better. I'm going to show you, this is actually just a quick run through for the homepage. So to go from mocks in Photoshop to code, this is some of the code for the stream libraries that I wrote, to this is my dev box, as quickly as possible. But I'm going to sort of air some dirty laundry right now and walk through a project. We call this the commenting UI. Commenting UI you see all over the place. It's on every photo, every video, every status update. It's probably loaded as much as any other component on Facebook except for the Chrome. The Chrome is the top nav and the bottom footer. Here you can see it's the blue box at the bottom. Mark Bixby posted something and several people commented on it. This is really at the heart of the communication part of our product. People constantly post things and people constantly sort of respond, and it's the dialogue. The goal with this project, this was a project that I initiated, or I was involved in, was to make comments more consistent with posts. This was happening at the same time that we did the homepage redesign. And as Aaron mentioned, we were trying to come up with a consistent way to post or to display what people were posting. So status updates started to look a little bit like photo posts, which looked a little bit like videos. And it made sense to us that comments should probably be similar. Me saying something about Soleio's photo should be relatively similar to me posting a status update. I'll show you. So this is the current implementation, and this is what was being suggested. It doesn't look like a very big change. We called it sort of like the white UI. We moved the text to the right of the name. We started with images for the faces, and we tried to make the input look like a comment itself, trying to be more consistent. This didn't go very well. I pushed this to, or me and one other engineer named Ross Baer, God bless his heart. It's not his fault, it was mine. We pushed this to all of Facebook employees without probably enough heads up. And we got a lot of angry feedback, and quality angry feedback. The first thing was that basically the UFI made it difficult to read. This is from, I believe Mark Slee, another engineer, that the UFI looked good on its own, but in the overall, putting it in the full stream, it sort of, well, he said overloading here, but I think when I talked to him in person, he was focusing on the fact that you really couldn't differentiate between posts. It really became very difficult to read. Again, here, it seemed it was too subtle. And, another thing that we hadn't talked about was that people tend, and this is an interesting behavior, people tended to skim the feed, look for big blue boxes, which meant that a bunch of people had talked about a post, and that was an indication of quality. This was actually a good thing. From a pure aesthetic perspective, it seemed like it wouldn't make sense to really put a bunch of blocks in the stream, but users actually had learned to use that to sort of as an indication of quality. So we didn't launch this. And the only reason we didn't launch this is because we pushed it to our employees it lasted about a week, and got really good feedback really quickly. This is, so also I wanted to talk about sort of how much we program. We don't program, we're not the most proficient programmers in the company, but I did some grepping of our logs over the last 2 years, which is as far back as my sandbox goes. And over 2 years, from the designers I could think of off the top of my head, we had roughly 4,200 commits, which is roughly 40 commits a week. A commit is, to anybody who's not technical, not just a line of code, it's a complete diff or a change in the code. So if I wanted to change the UFI, that would be one commit, usually. It could be anywhere between 50 and 5,000 lines of code. That's quite a lot of code, 40 commits a week, for a team that 2 years ago was, I believe, 5 engineers, and is now 15, but there's maybe 3 managers, so 12 active participants. That is not, actually I was sort of surprised at this number, but it's not something to sneeze at. I think it's really core to who we are. This doesn't mean that everyone has to be an amazing programmer. It just means that you have to have some level of technical understanding in order to really become more effective. So that's where I'm going to end. Get your hands dirty. For us, I focus on writing code. I'm going to hand this over to Soleio.
How you guys doing? All right, so I'm going to talk to you guys about the last hypothesis that we have in terms of how we do work here. Am I speaking too loud? Hope not. Good. I'll try to keep it brief. Don't fall in love. What do we mean by that? We're not really talking about the romantic love. When I sort of think about not falling in love, it's more along the lines of sort of staying humble, staying hungry, not being satisfied with, one good iteration, trying 5, trying 10. And this has been a lesson that, for me, working at Facebook for 4 years, I keep coming back to. Oftentimes, when I hit these pitfalls, it's often because you just sort of find yourself getting stuck on a particular project because you don't want to try something different. You're kind of happy with where you are. And you realize that you kind of fell in love with your work, and it wasn't that sweet to begin with. Let me try something different. And so I'm going to spend the next couple of minutes just walking through a couple of my projects and kind of like how this attitude of like not falling in love with your work applies to not just designers here at Facebook, but I think to any designer. Who recognizes this page? Show of hands. Dave, what page is this? Network portals, launched in March of 2007. Who recognizes this page? Anyone? Anyone? Dave Fetterman. Dave Fetterman and I worked on March Madness back in the spring of 2007. Really fun project, great team. This is really old. Who recognizes this? Show of hands. Matt Hale. Social timeline. Okay. So I'm showing you guys a bunch of different pages. Some of you may recognize them, some of you may not. The common thread across these 3 pages isn't that I worked on them and I spent a ton of time on them. The common thread that I kind of want to articulate is that they no longer exist on the site anymore, right? This is basically a museum of stuff. And going through that process of like, sweating out the details, building this stuff out, making it, work in, 4 different browsers and shipping it to millions of users and then having to pull that back, first time around, it kind of stinks, You fall in love with your work, you take pride in it, and it doesn't exist anymore. But I found, like, over time, I realized that the kind of work that we do, like, it boils down to a single fact, right? That software is fundamentally impermanent. It decays, right? And the metaphor that I often use is it's like building sandcastles, right? You can build a great sandcastle, but there's a lot of like pitfalls that you aren't going to be able to foresee, right? The tide, an errant beach ball, a clumsy swipe for your hand. And at the end of the day, you'll come back the next day and it's going to look like that, kind of, chewed up and birds flying in the distance. And so what I realized was that a lot of the work that we do as product designers is just scrapping the things that you do, right? Starting over. Once you kind of develop this attitude that the work that you do is impermanent, you start to realize that like the real goal is just to make bigger, better ones every single time. You show up every single day to work and you try to build it better. So with this in mind, I want to talk about our global nav redesign of 2008, to sort of see how this process applies. This is what the site looked like back in 2007. Little time machine for you. At the time, we were on the verge of, we had just launched Platform. We had a site structure that was really, fine-tuned and honed. We had great page standards, great design patterns, but it still wasn't perfect, right? Even at a point at which we had like really high engagement and we had a site that seemed pretty polished, it still wasn't good enough, right? If you sort of start to zoom in on the details, you start to realize there's a lot of like extra nav that persists page by page that maybe isn't entirely relevant. Things like these global links to applications. You look up at the core nav, you've got 4 links to pages and then 2 chevrons that drop down menus that introduce a dozen more links. A lot more complexity there, and then you shift your attention over to the right side of the frame and there's 4 more links for more stuff. For really intrepid users, you would have these hidden secret links that were disguised as like gray labels, but you moused over them and you turned to like hyperlinks. And then you'd have like the mystery home link that nobody seemed to use. Everybody would go over to the home link and click on that. So just looking at that site structure, we realized that like it still wasn't good enough, right? There was still a lot of refinement that could have been done, and that for an audience of 25 million users, it may be good, it may be okay. But as you're growing your audience, you have to realize that we have to make the site simpler and simpler, and that a lot of these core concepts are, if they're persistent on a page-by-page basis, you have to be constantly thinking about it. Like it kind of chews away at your attention. So I guess the point that I'm trying to make is that you sort of have to forecast as a designer. You have to sort of like not just answer to the current requirements of a product. But you also have to sort of be thinking about, okay, how's this going to look a year from now? What are the strategies that we're going to have to answer to in 2 years? Who knows this guy? What's his name? Somebody shout it out. Wayne Gretzky. Arguably one of the greatest hockey players of all time. What made him great? This quote: "I skate to where the puck is going to be, not where it has been," right? And I think this actually applied really well to this particular project because we realized there's a lot of stuff that we still needed to do as a company that the current page structure did not satisfy. And that was the fundamental charge of that project. So if we took a bird's eye view of how the page structure evolved over the course of the past couple of years and how we kind of arrived at where we are, you realize that there was a lot of Chrome. We actually had done a pretty good job of taking a site that had 2 frames, and we were smart enough to reduce it to 1, right? But there was still like a lot of persistent side nav up on the top, and even when we had hopped over to this frame, we still had a bunch of extra navigation. And so if you kind of take a bird's eye view, again, you sort of see that the canvas is growing, and it seems to be suggesting this eventual outcome, this idea of well, why do we need this frame? Why don't we open up this canvas, right? why do we need like 2 axes of navigation? Why not just have one? How do we sort of like identify the core couple of things that users are really going to need to have to use when they go to Facebook? Anybody recognize this site? It's Facebook.com, circa 2005, 2004. This was the longest standing design, just as a little side note. It was around for 18 months. This is what Facebook looked like. Isn't that nuts? We had tons of links, these really sweet features like My Parties, SocialNet. I don't know if you guys remember that. It's awesome. And then fast forwarding to 2007, we still had a lot of persistent nav. And then, you know, in the back of my mind, I was thinking, I feel like we can probably reduce this down to just 10 links. So going back to thinking about the stuff that Mosseri was talking about, the first thing that I did was like, all right, how do we distill the nav down to this many links? And how do we come up with a site experience that persists page by page, but that works across all the multitude of pages that we would have to support? You know, pages built by us, pages built by third-party developers. And so this is where trying everything was really critical. This is like going back to not falling in love. A single solution wasn't enough, right? The 10th solution wasn't going to be good enough. Even the 32nd, still not good enough, right? And so a lot of that time was basically spent just like building a really rough HTML mockup. And the great thing is like the Facebook Chrome is not super polished, so it's just easy for us to just throw ideas around. And so we started exploring all kinds of different treatments, you know, different colors, different heights for the menu bar. Will the menu bar bleed all the way across? You know, let's start to drop different pages on it. You know, let's see what happens when the canvas gets really big. You know, why make the you know, the page really big? Let's make this gray. Try these different drop-down treatments. Move the search input. And as you can tell, we tried out a whole lot of stuff. Took a couple months, right? And now we arrived at the menu bar that we have today, right? Was it brute force? Was the most efficient way to go about it? Maybe not. But there was a lot of exploration involved. And the way that we were able to try out so many things was the fact that we have, you know, technical designers. We have, for me, it was really simple to just be swapping through random CSS files. You know, you change like 12 lines of code and the whole thing looks totally different. You move a couple of lines of HTML around, I get a search input from right side of the page to left side. So this is what the site looked like today, or actually yesterday. And just to highlight something that I think is kind of important is that the product is organic. It constantly changes. And so the work is not really done yet. There's still more refinement that can be done. So just to kind of like loop back, the important thing to note is that the product fundamentally like needs to evolve, right? Look at the dinosaur, right? I feel like Facebook is kind of going through these kind of contractions where we try stuff out, we sort of push things out there, and then we start to kill things off, and we sort of scale back and figure out what's at the very core of what we do. And so the question is, you know, what's mightier? The gigantic, what is that, a Bronchiosaurus? Who knows this? Any dinosaur nerds out there? Brontosaurus, okay. Or is the rat? Is the rat, you know, the successor to the dinosaur? So I wanted to spend the next couple minutes just talking about how products evolve. And I'm going to highlight this one project that I worked on back in October 2006. It was around the time that we were launching Newsfeed. And it was vaguely named Share. And the idea behind Share was this idea that there's tons of content outside of Facebook.com, things like YouTube clips, news articles, you know, funny photos, random memes, and we wanted a way for people to be able to bring that content into Facebook and then redistribute it across the social graph. Who recognizes this? Show of hands. There shouldn't be any hands because it's never launched. Aaron. And so as designers, like part of the work that we do is just sort of like creating these like vision documents. Like instead of sitting down and writing out a spec, we're like, okay, what do we want, you know, this feature to do? We want to be able to put stuff on people's profiles and let them send it to their friends. And we wanted to do this additional little bit of extra work of taking like these ugly URLs and transforming them into something human, something recognizable, something that's kind of interesting just from the get-go. And forgive me if like any of this stuff is kind of racy. I haven't actually gone through these mock-ups regularly. So what was the early process? Just basically trying stuff out in Photoshop. The great thing about Photoshop is super fluid. It's really simple to use. You can sort of move stuff around the page. But moving stuff around the page would not get you really far. And so we had settled on this kind of concept of a shared dialogue. This thing where you could be able to provide a comment and then specify people that you would send this to, and also post it to your profile. And so we arrived at the share. Marcel, are you around here? There he is. Look familiar? Marcel worked with me on a share. And this goes back to lesson, I think, was it number 3? Look, I think the whole statement of Photoshop lying. I kind of fell in love with this design. It did a lot of really neat things. Let me show you what they did. It lets you, post to your profile or send to specific friends. You can type in a little comment. And it was kind of neat. I thought, well, maybe I can click check over here, and that'll reveal this side column, and then I can type in the name of the people that I want to send it to. And I can assemble a list of folks that I want to send it to. And oh, look, why don't we let people edit the preview? So I can edit the preview, and then I can change the title if I wanted to. And we know what images are on the page, so let's go ahead and select the image that we're going to share, right? I don't think we launched this, and if we did, it sucked, right? Photoshop seduced me. The moment we landed it in a browser, I realized that I had essentially built this really sophisticated tax form. There was a lot of functionality there that actually wasn't very relevant. So don't fall in love with your Photoshop designs. Make sure that you build it. Make sure you sort of get it inside of a browser and you use it. Try it out. And so we went through a whole bunch of different iterations, trying to figure out how do we separate the send and post workflow. We started moving the columns around. We tried out, with sort of rendered a preview in there, and you can start to see how we're kind of teasing out how this product is actually going to evolve and what kind of shape it's going to take down the road, right? This is a workflow that I basically sent out to Marcel, to Aaron Putnam when we were sort of working on early concepts for Megabox. And we were starting to all kind of gravitate around this idea of an attachment well, which today is a fundamental part of the publisher, right? Just this idea of well, why are we creating these random lists of names when we can just build this tokenizer? And I was like, Marcel, you can build a tokenizer, and then 3 days later he had it built, and that's the component that you see and love today. And then we started experimenting with other ways to try to break apart the workflow. This kind of brings us back to I kind of went full circle on how to establish which workflow you're going to go. Didn't quite make so much sense, and this is kind of where we arrived today. And I'm happy to announce that we have a new version of the shared dialogue that we're going to launch this week, thanks to the hard work of Isaac. Boom. Looks like it follows the stream format. It kind of has these hints of the publisher. And you know what? It won't be our last shared dialogue because our work is never done. A lot of this stuff, we have to kind of support future features, per post privacy. We may find maybe 3 months from now that nobody uses that, and then we'll have to kill that feature. And so going back to my original hypothesis, not falling in love with your product is actually an advantage that you can have in the work that you do, especially when it comes to product design, because then you don't sort of get enchanted by the things that you're doing really well today. You start to focus on the things that you can do really well next year. So that kind of wraps up, the 4 hypotheses of product design here at Facebook. We're thrilled to have you guys here. We don't know if these hypotheses are actually going to hold. I bet you if we come back a year from now, we'll have maybe hopefully fewer ones. We'll vote one of these guys off the island. But it's been a pleasure to have you guys here, and thank you for listening. One last thing, if you're not a fan of our page, you should be. We post really sweet stuff. So, here you go, Kate.
Yeah, so in the vein of sharing, we did start a page. We share a lot internally. We also share a lot with the users. But one of the reasons why we wanted to come out tonight was that sharing with our peers and colleagues in tech is really, really important to us. This is the first time we've done anything like this. So we want to open the floor for questioning. If anybody has any questions or wants to discuss anything. If you don't want to talk in front of everyone, everybody on the design team has these cute little pink stickers on. We'd be happy to grab a beer with everybody afterwards too. So if there are any questions, are we doing mics for questions? Oh, do you want a runner?
Just a quick question. How do you do A/B testing, and how do you get the measurements and the analytics from A/B testing to know which design to go with?
Christina's shaking her head, so I'll take it. We do A/B testing, and I think actually we have 2 frameworks right now. We're sort of settling on one. But generally what we'll do is we'll build 2 or 3 options for a specific piece of product and decide very early what metrics we want to optimize. It's very easy to say run a test. It's very hard to sort of nail down exactly what you're testing for. And we'll launch to a small subset of users, and we can target that set. We can say sometimes sometimes you can just pick a random, 100,000 users. Sometimes it's important to sort of permeate networks and just have an entire, like all of New York City needs to see this. We run tests usually for at least 1 week before we grab any data, and then 2 or 3 weeks probably total after that. And then we gather the data. We have a data team that's pretty kick-ass. I think there are about 20 between the guys who, the analysts and then the sort of backend engineers. We have a pretty crazy system to process all that data called Hadoop, Hive is built on Hadoop. And then we take that data and we see if our hypotheses are correct or not. And we use that in our decision making. But we try not to design by numbers. We try not to design explicitly for metrics, because if you only design for metrics, it's hard to have good countermetrics, and you can overcompensate. So it's usually one very important thing we keep in mind when making a decision. But we run A/B tests all the time for most any feature.
What sites do you look at for inspiration, for design inspiration of sites that are doing interesting and intuitive UI?
Sorry about that. We look at Twitter. No, I'm just kidding. I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of desktop software. I think me and Aaron would be the first to admit that we love the Apple experience. We kind of know that there's like a long history of queues that are out there, and like the real challenge, like for us, is trying to figure out. You take like these complex interactions that happen on the desktop, and how do you distill them? How do you sort of like create like find the right queues that people can universally recognize and apply them to to our interface? And then sometimes like it results in like crazy tax forms like the one I showed you earlier, and sometimes a hyperlink will suffice. So I'm personally a huge fan of Craigslist. I'm a huge fan of like drop dead dirty simple sites. Like I'm the first guy that'll be like, yeah, get rid of the Chrome, just make it a hyperlink, it'll be fine. So that's what I draw from inspiration.
I could say we also try to look laterally. I mean, desktop software is a good example. Also, we spend, at least once a week, we talk about how great the New York Times does something, and we try to steal from them. Good example. Yeah.
I actually had 2 quick questions. Maybe they're not quick for you, they're quick for me. It's hard to get really talented designers who are technical enough to actually jump into the code. Do you find it's easier to teach the coding to designers, or teach design to coding people, or both, or neither? Or like, how do you do that? And how many people came in pretty green and learned versus people who actually had both skill sets coming in? I'll just leave it there. That's probably enough for you guys to chew on.
Hello. Okay. I can definitely speak to the first thing. So I managed the team. I got here in January, and the first thing they sacked me with is they were like, "You have to hire product designers. They've only hired 1 in the past year. We need like 8. You've got to hire them." And we sat down, and in my interview process, I said, "Where are you finding these people?" And like, obviously, it's awesome that we have like these supremely talented people that can work end to end, but it definitely is a debate here. One thing that will never change about the team is that we believe in being very close to being to the technical organization and getting your hands dirty and understanding the code and prototyping early. That philosophy that was in the presentation will never change. We are considering and talking about like how do we hire more people in. They've got great people who are amazing product thinkers who can also do interaction design and visual design. Those are the top 3 things now that we're looking for. Technical expertise, or at least really awesome work experience working well with a front-end engineer or even back-end, is also super, super important to us as well. I don't know if anybody wants to share any experience on like training people. I know we've got a couple people that have come in.
One of the things about our team that's kind of interesting is even still today about half the people on the team have degrees from school or no degree at all that aren't related at all to design or to programming at all. And so most of us came into product design from some other direction. And so most of us have taught ourselves to do the technical work. And so I'd say for the most part, it's a little easier to bring someone up to speed technically. I know when Soleio came in, he was very confident during his interview, but he'd basically done just a small bit of PHP programming and a lot of ActionScript. And he taught himself on the job over the first couple months just how to wrangle PHP. And now you can sling code with pretty much anyone, so yeah.
One quick thing to add to that, if you saw in Aaron's early slide, we did talk about, we do have a UI, like UI engineering team that we're building up really closely. I've seen that work good at other companies, work really well. You pair a fantastic designer with a great front-end person, they become kind of 2 halves of the same brain and they can produce more and more and more. What I'm most excited about is that, I've worked at companies where a UI designer only did a wireframe, a visual designer only colored in the lines, then you had a content person who wrote the words, then you had a researcher that wrote it. You had 6 people in the room to make a decision. Here we've got it down to 1. If we need to expand it out to maybe like 1.5 or 2, it's probably okay. So.
I think it's also worth saying that sometimes working with another person like keeps you from making really dumb mistakes. Like I said, it's really easy to design and build a tax form, but then you put it in front of somebody else and you're like, yeah, well, I wouldn't use half of this. So I think just having people who can hang and folks that can help us move fast is the main priority. They don't have to be people who are just producing production quality code 100% of the time, but just that they can contribute and make sure we can get product out the door as quickly as possible.
And maybe a quick related follow-up is, how do you balance the sort of engineering side of empirical drive metrics optimize with the sort of design side, which almost by definition sometimes has to go against the metrics, but is some other thing you're trying to optimize, more qualitative or aesthetic? How have you guys had to fight that, especially since you're a very strong design team, but also very small, and it's a very fast-growing company that cares a lot about a lot of different metrics? Now I'll shut up.
I'll take this one. I think that the way we try to approach it is based on context. So we have a very small project team. A typical project has 1 designer, 1 product manager, and either 1 or a team of engineers, depending on the scope. In any given project, it may be important for you to play the role of the simplicity Nazi, or it may be important for you to play the role of the sort of the practical, functional, advocate. And it's on the designer to really sort of evaluate the context, the specific product, the team itself, how far they're pushing in one direction or the other, the company's focus. Are we on a simplicity kick? Are we on a functionality kick? And play the appropriate role to push in the appropriate direction. But that being said, I think that those 2 sides of the brain are sort of inextricably connected. I think that we try to think creatively through engineering work, and we try to think sort of structurally through the designs. Like these aren't, you're right to point out that they're sort of different modalities, but they're very related and there's a lot of overlap. Because essentially what we're doing at a fundamental level is always problem solving. And you can problem solve engineering problems, you can problem solve design problems. I think that's sort of at the heart of design. It's not art, it's sort of problem solving.
Yeah, just curious, does everything described tonight apply to your mobile experiences as well?
Yes. Absolutely. I'm the product designer on mobile, and yeah, absolutely, all the stuff we do. I'm the only one right now as a product designer on mobile, but some of our products, I guess, like the iPhone application, we have an amazing engineer, Joe Hewitt, who tends to take the lead on a lot of that stuff, but yeah, I'm involved in a lot of the different mobile products.
Short and sweet.
You guys talked a little bit about the sort of, you guys, the front end sounds sort of separate, and then there's a data layer, or like some back-end stuff that's happening. Is that happening separately? And if so, like, how does it work, the sync up between, like, here's where we're going with what we want the product to do, and here's what our crazy back-end databases and systems are doing? And do you ever run into the problem of, like, oh, you want to sort by name? Oh, yeah, we didn't build that into the data model. Like, how does that work?
Sure. I guess the way we solve this is by staying in sync very early on in the project, and it really helps to sort of be technical. We've all been in plenty of discussions where we're sitting there and we're talking about, like, how expensive is it going to be to index by this dimension, or can I really sort of pull in a slice in time and avoid duplicates, and how expensive is that going to be, and then talking about the costs and the trade-offs. So it's really just about being really close to the engineering side of the team early on, and just having those discussions early. We've made a few compromises along the way, but usually our engineers here are so quick, by the time you're sort of figuring out how to work around it, they solve the problem. So.
Oh, yeah, I have a question. Yeah. I guess it's everybody agree, different people like the different kind of food. Some people like the noodles, some people like the fish. So I apply the same philosophy. Probably different people have a different idea about what is the right UI. So from that viewpoint, how do you think if the Facebook collect some action from different users, based on those actions, they try to change the outline of the UI, such that the different user will get different UI based on their previous history? How do you think?
Just to be clear, you're asking about what do we think about customizing interfaces to user-specific histories?
Exactly, based on user previous history.
Sure. So we haven't tried anything like that. Usually, when we've gone down that road, it starts to feel a little too much like magic to us. It becomes a little unpredictable for the user what's going to happen, because the experience they had the first time that we're responding to customize the interface now doesn't match what the experience is like the second time they're back. I think broadly our philosophy is we want to design interfaces for the most part that are universal. We think that if we can't build an interface or a workflow that works pretty well for 95% of people, we're not there yet, and we need to keep on working at it. And there are a few interfaces we found that do seem to work really well for nearly that many people, and we're pretty happy with them. And then the trick is to get the rest of the interfaces to catch up. But we're always sort of shooting for one interface that works for everyone. That's sort of always our approach.
Hey guys, so we're gonna actually, you'll have opportunities to ask these guys questions after. We're actually gonna start hanging out now.